The thing that I think I missed about the Night of the Long Knives that's worth talking about, that's not necessarily in the history books, is the way that the news about it went out quickly. I had always imagined when we talked about this kind of purge within the Nazi party, I had always imagined it was like relatively sneaky, right? And it was sneaky up until the moment it happened, but it was a huge purge, right? And these major leaders throughout the Nazi party were assassinated or had mysterious suicides over the course of a couple of days. And Germany, Goebbels, Hitler, they knew that they had to explain why this was. And so they started putting out press releases almost immediately explaining the situation and trying to get ahead of the game in terms of propaganda. And when you look at the New York Times is one of my favorite sources because it is one of these kind of continual sources across decades and decades and decades, right? When you look at the New York Times front page from July 1st of 1934, what you see is like half the front page is dedicated to this thing that happened literally the day before in Germany, and people talking about like the official narrative and the unofficial accounts and why this happened. And there's, I mean, just headline after headline taking apart the individual pieces of this thing and trying to understand it. And so, like, when we talk about, we've talked about like 1937 and the conflict surrounding the Nazi participation in the Golden Gate Bridge ceremony or the Hindenburg having swastikas on it and why this was controversial. You have to understand that 3 years before that, the things like the Night of the Long Knives, these kind of very clearly moves from democracy to an authoritarian to the kind of fascism that like eats itself and cleans house was like publicly on the front page of papers even here in the United States.